Before the state, the land was divided under customary law. We knew this was ours.
Before, there were no government here, no laws from outside. The elders were the guardians of the forest with our own customary laws.
Long before most of today's nation-states came into existence, indigenous peoples across the world had been managing and protecting their ancestral territories, each culture using their unique systems of customary laws and governance.
For centuries, it was owned by the ancestors. They owned it and they had rights over it.
The colonial expansion of the European powers and the setup of modern nation-states that followed in Asia, Africa, and the Americas has meant indigenous peoples had to live by the rules of outsiders. This led to the territories of countless communities being partitioned into blocks of land, valued, documented, and exploited.
When they discovered America, they treated us very badly. They took many of our riches and took much of our territory.
We don't know how, but they became the owners of our lands with written deeds and everything.
Although indigenous peoples' territories still face many threats, there are now many effective ways for communities to protect their interests. One of these is through securing rights to their lands. This video is principally for communities who are looking to obtain rights to their lands and looks into 3 different land rights systems: community concessions on state land, individual land ownership, and communal land ownership. Our first example is about community concessions on state land. Community concessions are usually government schemes that give communities right to manage the land for a limited period of time, but do not give communities the right to own the land. Under these concessions, the community must apply to the government for temporary rights to manage the land. An example of concession rights can be found in the forests of northeastern Guatemala, Central America.
We know that this is state land, and we cannot have any land title over it. We are completely prohibited from selling and buying land because this is a state land. We have a right to the resources that the state has conceded to us. But not having a land title puts us in an insecure position because at any moment the state can decide not to renew the concession rights.
The Melayu people in Jambi, Indonesia, applied for and were given concession rights over almost 50,000 hectares of their ancestral territory, which they manage for a period of 35 years.
We have user rights now, but it's still the state that owns these forests. We are happy with this program, since maybe the land will not be sold, and our grandchildren can still live here.
Some people feel that community concessions are a step towards increasing community rights. Many others, however, feel that management rights are not enough.
Customary forest is about ownership, while the government village forest concession only offers management rights for 35 years. This is the weakness for us.
Management rights on state land can provide some protection for communities, but they do not recognize customary ownership of land, nor do they provide long-term security. Another type of land rights are private rights over individual plots of land that can be owned by a family or an individual through inheritance or through government certification programs. The individual certificate can be used as proof of ownership for buying or selling land and as collateral for borrowing money from a bank.
The owner has full rights over the land and resources. They can buy, sell, use, or develop the land as long as It is in accordance with local spatial planning.
At present, there are many government programs for individual land titling as part of a push for individual certification that is happening globally. But many believe that individual rights carry great risk.
In the past, communities had togetherness, common work, mutual respect. But now many are becoming egoistic. They don't think of the village as a whole. Now people are free to sell land without asking their family or the people in the village because it is in private ownership.
And if this land enters the free market, indigenous peoples will soon be evicted off their customary land, their ancestral land, because the best land will be bought by rich non-indigenous people.
The community of Penungu in North Sumatra, Indonesia, reject individual certification and choose to manage their land communally.
When the government gives land certificates, when indigenous peoples have a land certificate, we become poor. Why poor? Today, community culture is very short-term. For instance, when they have a certificate and want their child to get married or to set up a business, they can mortgage the land to the bank, to the middleman. If the business goes bankrupt, then the bank or middleman takes that customary land. In the end, the indigenous people become laborers on their own land. Our demand is not for certificates, but for the recognition and protection of indigenous people's rights over their lands.
The Maasai in Tanzania, Africa, have only fairly recently started to see individual titling coming into their lands.
So in our case now, we've seen people selling plots. The individual have the titles, and the Maasais are selling their plots on a throwaway price. Sometimes they sell a plot to send a child to school. They send a plot to buy 2 cows.
Land boundaries of individual ownership are fueling the erosion and loss of our culture. The old Maasai land has always belonged to our present and future generations, never to one single person alone. If we accept individual land titling, it will break our unity, which has held the territory for many centuries. The government talks about laws and policy, but we, the Maasai, talk about the territory and life.
The first 2 options we have seen are community management concessions on state land and individual land titling. Both of these are land ownership systems where the ultimate authority is with the state. Our third example is of collective rights to ancestral territory.
With the Maasai perspective of having the communal ownership, the land is owned by the community. No one's owned the land. We have got to manage it as a territory.
Collective or communal land rights are those when the land is legally owned and managed by the community as a whole. The communal territory is under the authority of the indigenous people and their representative institutions. The territory as a whole cannot be sold or split up, and the rights to the territory are permanent. However, within each communal territory, there are different ways of managing land, with areas for housing, areas where individual families farm land over generations, and protected areas. The indigenous peoples and their authorities are in charge of the spatial planning within the territory. Most indigenous peoples around the world feel that recognition of communal rights over territory best reflects the traditional, cultural, and spiritual relationship that they have to their land and their territory.
Our territory belongs to us, and we belong to our territory. The land is sacred. We can never sell her. She is our mother, and nobody can sell their mother.
Many countries in Latin America recognize communal titling.
It is community land that we cannot sell. Instead, we look after it intensively. We are the guardians of our territory. If we each had each land individually, maybe we will have sold it and wouldn't have land that can sustain a future generation.
When we have large communal lands, not individual land, we can protect our culture and continue to organize ourselves. It is better for us to have a communal territory.
This video has looked at 3 land rights systems: concession rights on state land, individual land ownership, and communal land ownership. If your community is looking for recognition of your rights to your lands, take time to consider which option will best reflect your interests. What are the benefits and drawbacks of each system? What land rights options are available for you? And how can the recognition of your rights help in defense of your territories?